This is Michael David Angel, and you're watching My Human and Me.
Picture the tech landscape right now. It's May 15th, 2026.
Right.
And the whole industry is basically locked in this massive software arms race over, standalone AI chatbots and these giant trillion parameter cloud models.
Yeah, everyone in Silicon Valley is just fighting to the death for cloud dominance.
Exactly. So what does the world's most valuable tech company actually do? Well, Apple just announced that on September 1st, they are officially making John Ternus their new CEO, replacing Tim Cook.
Which is wild.
It is. They are handing the keys to the entire kingdom over to a man who is best known for, building laptops.
Yeah, and it's a move that has left a lot of tech analysts totally scratching their heads. I mean, the initial reaction across the board has just been pure confusion.
Oh, absolutely.
Because why on earth would you put a hardware engineer in charge during the biggest software revolution since the internet? It just doesn't compute for a lot of people.
Right, which brings us to today. We are digging into a fascinating stack of research for this deep dive, anchored by this really comprehensive document called The Ternus Transition, Apple's hardware-first AI revolution.
A great read.
It really is. And our mission today is to unpack this exact paradox. We want to understand why handing this massive kind of existential AI crisis over to a hardware engineer isn't actually backwards. It's potentially, one of the most brilliant strategic reversals we have seen in decades.
It really could be.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really get why John Ternus is stepping into the CEO role, we have to look at the current state of the AI war, right? And, why Apple's reputation in this space has taken such a beating recently.
Yeah, the criticism against Apple has been incredibly loud lately.
So loud.
But it's really important to understand that this criticism is based entirely on the specific metrics the industry has just decided are important right now.
Right.
The tech world currently measures success by what we call visible intelligence.
Visible intelligence. Okay, so that means bigger, more bombastic models.
Exactly.
It means standalone chatbots that can write a full screenplay in 5 seconds. It means massive context windows. And when we read about these trillion parameter systems in the news, I think we have to ground that in physical reality for a second for everyone listening.
Yeah, please do.
Think of parameters as the neural connections in a digital brain. A trillion parameters require massive server farms. You need cooling towers, you need dedicated power grids just to store and run them.
They literally cannot fit on the phone.
Right, they can't. That is the playground for OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, and Anthropic. They are out there building supercomputers in the desert.
And because of that, consumers, you listening right now,
right.
You've basically been trained to associate artificial intelligence with a destination product.
Right, you go to it.
Exactly. You want to use AI, so you open a new tab, you navigate to a specific website like ChatGPT or Claude, and you actively engage with it. You go to the AI. Because Apple hasn't launched a flashy, all-knowing destination chatbot that competes on those exact terms, the prevailing narrative is that they are hopelessly behind.
Which naturally leads to all the skepticism surrounding the Ternus appointment. Because if you are losing a massive software race, the conventional wisdom says, well, you hire visionary software people.
Right.
It feels like a massive mismatch. I mean, isn't putting a hardware designer in charge of a generative AI revolution like hiring a master carpenter to fix a massive plumbing issue? It just feels like the wrong tool for the job.
That's a really common reaction. But looking at the strategy outlined in our sources, it's less like hiring a carpenter to fix plumbing and more like, imagine a city deciding that instead of building one massive central water purification plant, which is the cloud, right? They are just going to invent a microscopic filter that fits perfectly into every single faucet in the city. And that's the device.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the rest of the industry is out there digging giant trenches to lay pipe, and Apple is just quietly changing the faucet.
That is a fantastic way to look at it. Yeah. The assumption that Apple is behind assumes they actually want to build a central water plant.
Right, which they don't.
They don't. What the research reveals is that Apple's perceived weakness is actually a highly calculated, deliberate strategy.
So the mistake that people keep making with AI right now is assuming that the company with the smartest chatbot automatically wins. And it's easy to understand that given that we have the main platforms like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and from what I understand, some people use Copilot as well. But historically, technology doesn't usually work that way. Companies that dominate are usually the ones that hide complexity effectively. Apple, I think Apple, that consumers stop noticing the technology entirely. And this may not be placing all of the game in Apple's court if they're playing this correctly. I say that because when Google brought on Ray Kurzweil over a decade ago for their future tech, the concept of Google was very similar to what we're saying about the invisible structure of Apple's hardware layer, which is to say semantic search and our interactions with AI are meant to be more and more seamless as the technology goes along. That means solving the eyeglasses problem, conversational AI, lots of things we're going to go into this channel. So make sure and subscribe. Gotcha. Something to consider that this isn't necessarily just a one-dimensional ping-pong game back and forth between the multimodal chatbot and hardware being Apple's one big play. Because we also see what's going on between Ericsson, Nokia, and the unimaginably powerful NVIDIA processors. Data centers are the necessary infrastructure not because of the processing power alone, but because of the location of real-time edge computing. Will Apple be able to win their side of the game by making hardware that is powerful enough for the Internet of Things that's coming? And this is my unique opinion. I'm not getting this from other people's research, and there might be other people saying the same thing, but it's something to think about. And if I end up being right, you heard it first, right here.
They're completely opting out of the game everyone else is playing.
Interesting.
To understand why, you just have to look at their historical playbook. I mean, Apple has virtually never won a market by being the first to invent a category.
Oh, totally. You look at the smartphone. I mean, the BlackBerry and the Palm Pilot were out for years, establishing the market, training people to use mobile email.
Yep.
Then Apple drops the iPhone and just completely rewrites the rules.
Exactly the same with the smartwatch, the tablet, the MP3 player. I mean, in every single one of those technological shifts, Apple let other companies rush in, take the arrows, make all the messy mistakes.
All the clunky UI.
Exactly. Introducing these complex, clunky versions to the public. Apple always enters late.
Yeah.
But when they do enter, they do something very specific.
What?
They absorb all of that terrifying software complexity into beautiful, simple hardware. They vertically integrate the entire experience, and then they just dominate consumer adoption.
And we are definitely in the complex and clunky phase of AI right now. I mean, think about the cognitive overload you experience just trying to use these tools today.
Oh, it's a nightmare.
It really is. You are juggling 5 different AI apps, trying to remember if Claude is better for analyzing a PDF, or if you should use Gemini for a coding problem, or if you need to open ChatGPT to draft an email. It is exhausting.
It is entirely unsustainable for the average consumer. And Apple sees that fragmentation. They see the friction. And their strategy is to do what they have always done. Take that chaotic user experience and simplify it until the technology itself becomes entirely invisible.
So if they are playing a fundamentally different game than Google or OpenAI, we need to understand their specific playbook for this era. And the sources make it crystal clear. To understand Apple's future, you have to look really closely at John Ternus's past.
Right.
Ternus is not a software celebrity. He doesn't, go on podcasts and wax poetic about the philosophical nature of neural networks.
No, definitely not.
He joined Apple back in 2001 as a product designer. And over the decades, he has quietly become this structural mastermind, leading the most difficult hardware transitions in the company's entire history.
And there is one transition on his resume that is the absolute key to this entire deep dive.
Okay.
It happened in 2020. And it provides the exact engineering blueprint for what Apple is doing with artificial intelligence right now.
The Apple Silicon transition.
Yes.
This was a seismic event in the tech world. I mean, in 2020, Apple announced they were just dumping Intel processors, which had powered Macs for, over a decade?
This decade, yeah.
And moving their entire computer lineup to custom-designed chips built entirely in-house, the M-series chips.
Which at the time was viewed as wildly arrogant.
Oh, people thought it was crazy?
Overwhelmingly risky. Analysts thought it would be a chaotic disaster. Developers were terrified their software would break. But instead, Apple executed one of the most flawless hardware transitions in computing history.
They really did.
Suddenly, MacBooks were running faster, staying cool to the touch, and delivering battery life that frankly seemed to violate the laws of physics compared to the old Intel machines.
I honestly think that most people underestimate how important the Apple Silicon transition actually was. So it wasn't just a laptop upgrade. It was Apple proving that they control an entire computing stack themselves. It's a hard thing to understand, but if you think about the integration of what goes into a computer, and really honestly what goes into an iPhone, we're talking about the processing and the processing layer connected to the software layer. They can outperform entire industries that are still stitching components together from different companies. Now, that's a good balanced perspective of Apple versus the rest of the industry as it relates to AI, but that's not a fair assumption when it comes to what still is actually required to run an iPhone. There are dozens of patents that have nothing to do with Apple involved in gaining all those technologies together.
But wait, I have to push back here for a second.
Sure.
Because owning the hardware stack is great for making a laptop battery last longer. It is a brilliant engineering feat. But AI is a fundamentally different beast.
Okay.
As we just talked about, generative AI requires data centers the size of football fields. So how does a custom M-series chip sitting on my desk actually compete with an Amazon server farm processing 1 trillion parameters? It doesn't seem to scale.
What's fascinating here is that the Apple Silicon move was never just about getting better battery life. It was a Trojan horse.
Really?
Yeah, it was a strategic proof of concept for a completely different architecture. You see, traditional computers are built like a sprawling city.
Okay, I'm with you.
You have the central processor over here, the graphics card way over there, and the memory sitting somewhere else. When the computer wants to do a complex task, the data literally has to commute across the motherboard.
Right.
That commute creates latency, and it drains power.
It is incredibly inefficient, especially for something as demanding as artificial intelligence.
Exactly. So what Apple did with their silicon was introduce something called unified memory architecture. They took that sprawling city and turned it into a single skyscraper.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. The central processor, the graphics processor, and crucially the neural engine were all put on the exact same microscopic chip, sharing the exact same pool of memory.
So the data doesn't have to commute anymore.
Exactly. It just takes the elevator.
Wow. Meaning the hardware can process incredibly complex tasks at lightning speed without, instantly killing the device's battery or melting the laptop chassis.
And that is the mechanism that makes their AI strategy possible. With Apple Silicon, they proved they could control the entire stack.
The whole thing.
Yeah, they designed the hardware, the operating system, the silicon architecture itself, the power optimization, and the developer ecosystem. They aren't renting parts from other companies anymore.
Right.
And the sources point out that this is the exact pattern emerging for their AI rollout. They are applying the Apple Silicon playbook to generative AI, allowing them to run highly capable models directly on the device itself.
Which completely shifts where the competitive battle lines are drawn. I mean, if the rest of the industry is building for the cloud and Apple is building for the device, we are talking about two entirely different defensive modes.
Completely different.
Google, Microsoft, and OpenAI, they're spending billions of dollars to build cloud dependency. They want you reliant on their massive server farms. But Apple is building device dependency.
So this is where the entire AI industry starts splitting into two completely different philosophies. One future where intelligence lives in giant centralized data centers, which we either look at the data center play that NVIDIA and Nokia and Ericsson are battling, or whether some of that could actually be offset by the cell towers where they're automatically located, because that's the signal that needs to keep your sub 10 millisecond response time to local edge computing. One future says intelligence lives in giant centralized data centers controlled by a handful of companies. The other says intelligence becomes embedded directly into the devices people already own and trust. Should you trust them? I don't know. That's a big question. Especially AI changes the landscape on how those operate and how that information is shared. And if your phone is intelligent enough to know how to help you semantically find files or solve problems, that also means that it is the single largest attack service to your personal information. Right now, we just have to worry about transcribed and audio and video of your private conversations and anything that you store in your phone. Now we have to add an intelligence layer to that, where it doesn't even necessarily have to go to a 3-letter agency to be a breach of privacy. And Apple is not a government. So they have different rights as corporate rights to privacy relationships and the fine print than a government does. Government can't breach things, even though they have in certain ways, but they can buy that information off the market. I'll leave it at that.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can see why Apple is taking this contrarian route. The current AI industry is operating on a very specific assumption.
Which is?
That the future belongs to whoever builds the absolute smartest, most capable cloud model. Whoever has the highest IQ AI wins the whole board.
The smartest brain wins.
Right. But Apple is betting against that. They are betting that raw intelligence is eventually going to become commoditized.
That makes total sense. I mean, eventually, OpenAI's model, Google's model, Anthropic's model, they are all going to be roughly as smart as each other.
Exactly.
They will all be able to code and write and analyze at a genius level. The raw intelligence will just become a basic utility, no different than like electricity or Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
You don't care who generates the electricity in your house as long as the lights turn on when you flip the switch.
Precisely. And if raw intelligence is just a commodity, the entire competitive battlefield flips upside down.
Okay.
The winning question is no longer who has the smartest AI. It becomes who controls the most seamless, frictionless ecosystem for deploying that AI.
Oh, wow.
And that is a fight Apple is uniquely positioned to win. Because unlike a nimble AI startup that has to convince you to download their app, Apple possesses a moat that is almost incomprehensibly massive. 2.5 billion active devices worldwide.
2.5 billion devices in people's pockets, on their wrists, sitting on their desks.
This might actually be the single biggest strategic insight in the entire video. Apple doesn't want AI to feel like a separate product category. They want intelligence to become part of the operating system itself. I'm not a big fan of that. And they're not alone in that either. That's Microsoft too. And it might be where a lot of people decide to just make the shift to Linux, which would be the ultimate power move. They want intelligence to become part of the operating system itself, something so frictionless that eventually users stop thinking about where the AI ends and the device begins. Again, that might be the better user experience, but is that the better human experience? Is that what's better for people in the long term? I'm not sure that that synthesis is actually what we want. The post-humanist does, the transhumanist might. Maybe just the human shouldn't necessarily fit into those two camps, but that's a philosophical question. It's just one that's going to force our hand in less than a year.
So what does this all mean?
Right.
Like, how does this overarching business strategy actually translate into the technology that you, the listener, will be interacting with every single day?
Right.
The sources provide some very tangible technical details about what this hardware-first future looks like under John Ternus. First and foremost, it relies heavily on on-device inference.
Which means the actual AI processing, the thinking, right, happens right there in your hand, utilizing the neural engine inside that unified Apple silicon chip.
Not in a server farm.
Right. Instead of packaging up your data, sending it to a server in Nevada somewhere, waiting for it to process, and then downloading the result, the device handles it locally.
And the physical byproduct of that local processing is total privacy.
Exactly.
Your personal data, your photos, your text messages, they don't have to leave your physical device to be analyzed by the AI. That is a massive, tangible privacy advantage that cloud-based models simply cannot offer because, well, their entire architecture requires your data to be fed into their servers.
And it completely changes the goalposts. When you control the hardware, the operating system, the silicon architecture, and the consumer distribution layer, those 2.5 billion devices we talk about, you don't necessarily need to win the race to build the single most intelligent frontier model.
Right, you just need a good enough one.
You just need to be the company that integrates a good enough model, the best, into the products people already touch 100 times a day. Very few companies in the history of consumer technology have ever controlled that many layers simultaneously.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've talked deeply about the back end, right? The unified memory, the silicon architecture, and the infrastructure. But what does this actually feel like for the user?
Yeah, the day-to-day experience.
Exactly. The biggest implication buried in all these sources, like the real revelation here, is that the most critical part of Apple's AI strategy isn't actually what they are building. It is what they absolutely refuse to become.
And they refuse to become a destination chatbot.
Yes. Think about the friction of the current AI experience. Let's say you receive a long, complicated email and you want an AI to summarize it for you. Right now, what do?
It's a whole process.
It is. You highlight the text, you copy it, you switch apps, you open a browser, you load ChatGPT, you paste the text, you type out a prompt asking it to summarize, you wait, you read the result, you copy the summary, and then you paste it back into your notes.
It's awful.
It is a tedious, multi-step process. Apple wants to completely eliminate that.
Because treating AI as a destination product violates their core design philosophy. They're leaning entirely into this concept of invisible infrastructure.
Invisible infrastructure.
Yeah.
So, because once technology becomes invisible, it also becomes psychologically unquestioned. And that's a problem. You should always question technology. And that's part of the conversation that I think becomes really important over the next decade, over the next year. The companies that control invisible intelligence layers may eventually shape human behavior more powerfully than the companies that simply build visible software products. And I'm going to leave it with that because I think the rest of the conversation that I've designed for this video articulates it well. So, and also subscribe.
Artificial intelligence isn't supposed to be a place you visit. It is supposed to be a quiet, highly capable layer that is naturally embedded across every single interaction you have with the operating system.
It is the concrete realization of invisible infrastructure. I mean, under Apple's hardware-first approach, instead of going through those 6 steps of friction to summarize an email, you just press a physical button on your MacBook keyboard.
Yep.
The NPU chip instantly intercepts the text currently on your screen, processes it locally without an internet connection, and rewrites it in 0.2 seconds.
It goes directly back to that famous Apple ethos, right? It just works.
It just works.
Think about taking a photo on your smartphone right now. When you tap the shutter button, you aren't thinking about the image signal processor inside the silicon chip calculating the white balance or adjusting the exposure or running a dozen neural networks to balance the shadows in real time.
No, never.
Just look at the screen and think, wow, this is a great photo. It just works.
You don't feel like you are using complex computational photography, and Apple wants generative AI to feel exactly the same way.
Totally.
If you are looking for a highly specific photo from 3 years ago, the system just intuitively surfaces it based on a vague natural language description. If you're writing a document, the OS just naturally helps you refine the tone as you type. You, the listener, you shouldn't feel like you are actively using AI at all.
It is the ultimate technological magic trick. You take the staggering, overwhelming complexity of large language models, neural engines, and generative inference, and you hide all of that messy plumbing behind a simple, elegant pane of glass.
You make the complexity disappear.
Exactly. And historically speaking, Apple has been more successful than any company on Earth at turning invisible infrastructure into trillion-dollar businesses.
It is a profound shift in perspective, and it really entirely reframes the news of this executive shakeup.
It really does.
So to quickly recap the journey we've taken today, the tech world is entirely obsessed with the cloud AI race, making the appointment of a hardware engineer like John Ternus to Apple CEO seem like a bizarre surrender.
But it isn't a surrender.
No, it isn't. Apple is simply changing the battlefield. By leveraging their blueprint of the Apple silicon transition, controlling every single layer of the computing stack, and utilizing a massive moat of 2.5 billion active devices, they are aggressively pivoting away from clunky destination chatbots. They are turning artificial intelligence into a hardware-first, invisible infrastructure.
And this raises an important question, one that really gets to the heart of where our relationship with technology is heading next.
I'm listening.
If Apple succeeds in this hardware-first revolution, if they manage to make artificial intelligence completely invisible, quietly and seamlessly embedded into every single device and every digital interaction we have, will there come a day when we completely forget we are even interacting with an artificial mind at all? And if this incredibly powerful technology becomes as invisible and as necessary as the air we breathe, who really controls the environment we are living in?
That is a heavy, fascinating thought, and it's exactly the kind of thing you should mull over the next time your phone seemingly reads your mind to surface the exact piece of information you were looking for.
Definitely.
We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep questioning the technology around you, keep looking for the invisible infrastructure shaping your own life, and we will catch you next time.